particularly happy with our meeting today. Good and substantive discussions on the economic situation.
On n'entend plus rien.
Sorry, Luisa, can you unmute the PC of Minister Centeno, because it's muted.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, good. Please, sorry.
Okay, sorry, let's restart.
Can we do it? Good afternoon. This is my last press conference as president of the Eurogroup. I am particularly happy with our meeting today. Good and substantive discussions on the economic situation, lots of energy to counter this crisis with further policy action, and an exciting and competitive race to elect a new president to lead the Eurogroup going forward. Let me formally announce to you that the Eurogroup has a new president, Paschal Donohoe. Pascal's term, which is 2 years and a half, will begin on July 13th. We had 3 excellent candidates, all very competent, experienced ministers and highly regarded members of the Eurogroup. I'd like to thank the other 2 candidates, Nadia Calvino and Pierre Ramenya, for their initiative and commitment to the work of the Eurogroup. I do not have to introduce Pascal to you. Let me just say that it has been a true pleasure working with Pascal for the past 2 years and a half, and his contributions to the Eurogroup's work has been highly valued by colleagues. I have no doubt that Pascal will make an excellent president of the Eurogroup and will heartedly wish him every success in his post. Before giving the floor to Pascal, let me briefly report on the rest of the Eurogroup meeting today. We welcome João Leão, my successor as Portuguese Finance Minister. We also received an update of the new French government program from Bruno Le Maire, who was reappointed minister. We started our agenda with a discussion of the economic situation. The Commission presented its interim summer forecast, which confirms that the euro area entered a recession of unprecedented depths in the second quarter. The forecast also confirms that the rebound has started, though it is far too early to relax. The euro area economy is expected to shrink by almost 9% this year, and even if the rebound continues next year, as we hope, we will still be far below where we were. Without the swift and determined policy responses we have implemented at the national and European levels, the situation would even have been far worse. It rests on our shoulders the task to prove part of these bleak projections wrong. These forecasts do not factor in the impact of the recovery instrument. A timely agreement at the European Council on a robust recovery plan would surely constitute an upside risk. And so the policy response to the pandemic remains our prime focus. This set the stage for our discussion of the fiscal stance, for which we welcome Professor Niels Steenhuisen, the chair of the European Fiscal Board. This is a regular item of our meetings, but the discussion was anything but business as usual. While everybody focused on the COVID-19 situation, something remarkable has happened. We ended up with a fiscal policy consensus. The EFB, the Commission, the ECB, and Eurogroup ministers all support timely and targeted policies to combat the pandemic and to protect the fabric of our economies and societies. This translates into a strongly supportive fiscal stance in the euro area, which complements the supportive monetary policies of the ECB. This is our focus for 2020. For next year, uncertainty remains very high. The policy challenges may change in the coming months, and our policy responses may have to adapt. As ministers gear up their budget preparations for next year, there is a broad consensus on supportive policies for next year as well. That brings me to the end. With the benefits of insight, we can say that the past 2.5 years were, for the most part, an intermission between 2 crises, the sovereign and the pandemic. We used this period wisely, carving out a renewed role for the Eurogroup. The Eurogroup earned its reputation as a crisis management body. In the past few years, the conversation changed as we sought to coordinate fiscal and economic policies more closely in good times. Let me say that it has been an honor to participate in the important work of the Eurogroup for the past 5 years, first as a member and then as president. It has also been a pleasure to work with talented colleagues from across the continent in a true spirit of European cooperation. Let me also thank you, the journalists, for your interest and attention in these years. I truly enjoy our interactions. It is time for me to hand over. So, Pascal, congratulations again. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and I look forward to having the opportunity to speak to and to get to know all of our colleagues from the media that are attending this event virtually, and look forward to engaging with all of them during my tenure as president of the Eurogroup. I want to begin by first acknowledging the immense work of my colleague, my friend, Governor, I should say, Mario Centeno, who during his tenure as president of the Eurogroup laid the foundations for allowing our euro, our common currency, to be stronger, to be more resilient at a great time of challenge. It was a great privilege to have the opportunity to work very closely with Mario, both as a colleague, as Minister for Finance for Portugal, and then as President of the Eurogroup. And I saw at first hand his qualities of skill, of patience, his dedication and moving the debate forward. And I will do my best to continue those qualities during my tenure as President of Eurogroup. I want to acknowledge and thank the members of the Eurogroup for the support that they have offered me in the vote earlier today. And I'm very conscious that as this vote takes place, we do so in the shadows of, as Mario described it a moment ago, two different crises. The aftermath of the crisis of the sovereign, the current deep challenge that we now face of the crisis of a pandemic. And as I begin my tenure as president of the Eurogroup, I'm deeply conscious that the citizens of Europe are looking at where their national economies now stand, are looking at the European economy and have become concerned, have become fearful again for their futures, for their jobs and for their incomes. This is a challenge that I understand. It is a challenge that the members of the Eurogroup deeply understand. And during my tenure as president, when I take over from my colleague and friend Mario, I will be working closely with all members of the Eurogroup to look at how the euro, to look at how our shared currency can be a foundation in responding back to these great challenges. And as great as the challenges are, and I know how deep they are, I'm absolutely confident that with my colleagues in the Eurogroup, with our governments, we have the ability and we have laid the foundations to overcome these challenges and to prevail. And I will play my part in working with all members of the Eurogroup to ensure that this group makes the contribution to that recovery. The challenges are great, but we will prevail and we will overcome them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President-elect Paschal Donohoe. Before passing the floor to the Commissioner, let me just recall that the Council sent out a press release with the outcome of this vote and with some background information. Commissioner Gentiloni, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. First of all, let me warmly congratulate Pascal on his election. You are taking over at a time of unprecedented challenges, but I know, Pascal, that you have what it takes to forge a strong consensus and chart an ambitious way forward. It's not just a question of managing the crisis, but of making the euro area stronger, more resilient, and more sustainable. And you know that you can count on the Commission to be a reliable partner in that sense with the Eurogroup. Let me also take this opportunity to say another word of thanks to Mario for his hard work. I had the opportunity to cooperate with Mario only in the last 7 months, but very challenging months. And your leadership, Mario, with your relaxed determination, brought the Eurogroup to overcome difficulties and to reach very difficult agreements. Very briefly, on today's meeting, I outlined to the Eurogroup the main findings of the forecast that we presented today. We know that the pandemic has hit the European economy harder than expected, and moreover, the risk of increasing divergence, which was the rationale for proposing our common recovery plan, is now clearly materializing. And while we have been seeing many encouraging signs of a rebound since May, our forecast shows that the road to recovery is still paved with uncertainty. We also had a useful discussion on the fiscal stance in the euro area, taking as our starting point the report of the European Fiscal Board. In 2020, we see a fiscal impulse of around 3.5 of GDP for the euro area. This is the highest stabilization effort in the last 20 years. Our forecast estimates that the fiscal policy action taken will have a positive impact on real GDP of around 5 percentage points in 2020. In other words, this was the right thing to do, and we are not calculating in this positive impact our recovery package. The report of the European Fiscal Board has put a number of key considerations on the table: the need to provide further fiscal support in 2021, the recommendation to clarify the duration of the general escape clause, the idea that the return to the pre-pandemic GDP levels should be the reference for a decision to lift the general escape clause. This is a discussion that will take place in parallel with that on the review of our economic governance, which was launched earlier this year, but put on pause because of the pandemic. The review was eclipsed by events, but not rendered irrelevant by them. On the contrary, the fiscal response to the pandemic adds a key new dimension to the review of our economic governance, which we must absolutely take into account in conclusions next year. And this will be one of the arguments of our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. From the ESM in Luxembourg, Klaus Regling, please. Thank you.
Yes, good evening, everybody. Let me also start by congratulating you, Pascal, on your election to President of the Eurogroup. As the Commissioner said, the times are challenging, so you take over a great responsibility as Europe is overcoming the devastating human and economic consequences of the COVID-19 crisis, and because the Eurogroup has a central role in this. You can count, of course, on the ESM's full institutional and my personal support in every possible way. As the Eurogroup president, you will also become the chairperson of our Board of Governors, the highest decision-making body of the ESM. The same happened to your predecessors, Jean-Claude Juncker, Jeroen Dijsselbloem, and Mario Centeno. Your appointment will be done in a written procedure by our 19 governors, the 19 euro area finance ministers next week. Let me also use this opportunity to thank Mario for your achievements during these last 2.5 years And of course, from my perspective at the ESM, also in particular as chairperson of our Board of Governors. And I think there are three areas that will always be remembered that they were achieved during your presidency. First, the end of the Greek program in August 2018. And in that context, we agreed on a full range of additional debt relief measures. It was not easy to get it done, but that was certainly worth the efforts and is helping Greece up to today and for a long time to come. Second, the agreement on the ESM reform in the Eurogroup at the end of last year. We are waiting now that the ratification will start because this will be an important step for deepening EMU. But to get that far, agreeing on the amendment of the ESM treaty was a very important achievement. And then, as Paolo already said, the third item is the agreement on the 540 billion package in April this year, and where the ESM contributes 240 billion euro. So I think this is really a lot that happened from the ESM perspective during your tenure, and I wish you all the best for your future. Now, looking very briefly at the agenda today, when I look at the Commission interim forecast, it's very obvious that there's a very high degree of uncertainty. Yes, the different forecasts that I see from public sector institutions and the private sector, they have all converged significantly over the last few months. So there's very broad agreement of what is happening this year and next, of course, against that background of a lot of uncertainty. Clearly, in Europe, the recovery started already in May. So we are in this recovery phase, unlike some other parts of the world. And the high frequency data actually look a bit better than expected. But the drop in economic activity in March and April was so bad that we will not return to the 2019 income levels before 2022. Without the measures taken at the national level and by the European institutions in recent months, clearly the economic situation would be even worse. In my contacts with financial market participants, I hear again and again that markets are impressed by the European reaction to the COVID-19 crisis. They are impressed by the speed of the decisions in Europe, by the volume of the measures, and by the degree of cooperation among the European institutions. Of course, now markets are waiting for the decision on the recovery fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Klaus Regling. We will now pass to the questions. I will take 6 questions from Zoom, and you will forgive me this time around for not following the usual Zoom order. I will start to give the floor to Naomi O'Leary from the Irish Times. Naomi?
Hello, and thank you very much for taking my question. My question is for Minister Donohoe, and I would like to know how he proposes to bridge the gap on the disagreement on the EU Recovery Fund and what the chances are for a deal next week. Thanks very much.
Naomi, thank you very much for your question. I will be working very hard with all of my colleagues to ensure that the Eurogroup plays a very constructive and positive role in reaching agreement on the recovery fund. Of course, the really vital next step will be the meeting that will take place for our leaders in the European Council. That will be happening at the end of next week. And I would expect in the of that, will be given at both the national and the European level in terms of how we can make progress. I believe there is much to be done. There are many complex and challenging decisions that need to be made, but I believe the will is there to find a way to reach agreement. During the discussions that I had with all members of the Eurogroup during the campaign for the presidency, I was very struck by the appreciation that all colleagues have regarding the scale of the challenge that we have and the commitment that is there at national and European level to ensure that we can put in place the decisions that are needed to deliver an inclusive recovery. And while I am deeply conscious of the difficult decisions that need to be made, I understand the differing views in the run-up to and in the aftermath of the European Council.